Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we have something a little bit different where I'm going to be looking at a number of books, not specifically RPG books, but related to RPGs in some ways, that I think would be really great gifts to give to game masters or players. Your game masters and your players probably have enough specifically D&D or RPG books to last them a lifetime. And I think a really good gift is something that is closely related to the things that they're interested in, but it's also a little bit different and is surprising, and that shows a lot of thoughtfulness. So I have a whole bunch of different ideas here that I think would fit with a number of different types of players or game masters. First of all, we have this art book, Fairies of the Fault Lines, as observed and documented by Iris Compiet. Hopefully I'm saying the name correctly. This is an art book, and it's kind of a monster manual that would fit really well with any kind of D&D campaign that takes place in a fairy tale-like setting. Dolmenwood is a perfect example. There's plenty of RPG settings and adventures kind of related to that theme, and I think this would fit really well with all of them. Like I said, it's like a monster manual, but it doesn't have stats because it is mostly designed for people who really like cool artwork. I love how it has pencil sketches along with full color pieces of artwork. And it's the kind of book where if you're exploring a fairy tale world and the players come across a strange creature, you can just open up to a page of this book and it's probably going to have something related to it. We have different types of sprites and dryads, ent-like creatures, fawn-like creatures, creatures that seem to be made out of brambles or leaves or flowers. All of the writing and description in the book is in this kind of in-world scrawly writing describing what the person writing this book is seeing as they are investigating the deep, dark woods. And that means that I think this book could work really well as an almost in-world artifact. Perhaps they go to a bookstore inside your D&D game world and they win this book, and you simply hand it to them and they use it to look up creatures that they discover and get some hints about what they're like and how you might want to interact with them. But of course, it's also a perfect book for people who just love really beautiful artwork. It's extremely well bound, nice thick paper quality. It feels really good in your hand. It's just a joy to flip through. My kids love it especially because they like trying to draw the creatures in it. And by the way, I will put links down in the description below for where you can pick up all the books I'll be showing you in this video. The next book I wanted to show you is The Art of Ian Miller. Now, Ian Miller is one of these absolutely iconic artists when it comes to role-playing games. You've probably seen his art most likely in a lot of Warhammer stuff, because he, along with John Blanche, are really the most important artists in terms of defining Games Workshop's grim, dark style. Ian Miller's distinct style, though, is really one of a kind. It's very prickly, it's very dense, lots of fine detail to everything. Almost there's too much detail, like the whole page is overflowing with it as it gets more and more specific and detailed as he gets deeper and deeper into the drawing. Now, I first discovered Ian Miller's artwork in A Tolkien Bestiary, which is a book that I had as a kid. And even in that book, it really stood out to me because it looks like nothing else in the book. Here we have one of the Ents attacking Orthanc over there. This image, or one very similar to it, I think, made it into the cover of a Warhammer adventure. This one, I think, is from H.P. Lovecraft. He's done a lot of covers for kind of fantasy and weird horror books. Covered lots of different genres, science fiction, fantasy. Often a lot of his characters have this weird combination of looking like they're machines along with being organic, which is slightly disturbing, and I kind of love that about it. He's really great at drawing trees, these gnarled trees with lots of spindly branches and faces poking through the bark. It's fantastic. He's also done a lot of work for novels like Gormenghast, which is a novel that takes place in this almost infinitely large, strange Gothic castle with these characters that just wander around, and there's hardly any plot. It's very much about the atmosphere, and it's a really great fit. So yeah, this is a image from Gormenghast specifically. His art style definitely isn't for everyone, but I think for game masters who appreciate the kind of old school aesthetic, this would be a really cool choice. Next, we have a really interesting book called Guelph, The Survival Guide by Larry McDougall. And this is basically an art book, but it's also a setting. It is a fantasy world that feels like it should be a D&D setting, but it isn't explicitly. I get the feeling that it's kind of inspired by a lot of D&D worlds, although probably the biggest influence I would say is Redwall. I don't know about you, but I actually grew up reading an awful lot of Redwall. I actually met the author at one point, which was one of the highlights of my childhood. So here we have a map. Yeah, here it is. Here's the map of the Guelph setting, and it stretches all the way this way and then down the next 2 pages as well. So it's a long kingdom kind of along this river, and there's a wall over here with a border with Raven Country, and the ravens are the bad guys. And a number of different types of woodland creatures. You got your rabbits, your sparrows, your badgers, and so forth, work together in semi-harmony against these villains that are encroaching on their territory. But unlike Redwall, it definitely has more of a magical element to it, where there are spells and ghosts and things like that. This artist has been producing art set in this setting on their Instagram for a very long time, and this is kind of the culmination of putting it all together into a big setting that you can explore. And it's really written in the style of a guidebook. So as if you were visiting the region, and this is telling you the different places that you should stop by and visit. If you were going to convert this into an actual D&D setting, you would have some work to do. It isn't designed specifically for that. It doesn't have stats for anything, obviously. And it's really not as much focused on the problems and the difficulties that you're going to run into. There is some of that, but any kind of D&D adventure has more of a focus than a travelogue to a region would. You would probably have to create your own random encounter tables, your own magic items, your weapons, your armors, and all of that sort of thing. But again, the imagery is very inspirational and would go a long way towards very quickly communicating to players what different locations and characters looked like. That's a really great location right there. I think it would also lend itself quite well to cozy RPGs. I haven't played a lot of cozy RPGs myself, but from what I understand, they are increasingly popular, and this would fit right in with that. Here we have some lists of equipment that you might want to pick up, although it's a little bit brief. The scrublands are the more dangerous areas near the exterior of the world, including you have these zombie-like creatures infected with the mange. You might encounter some creatures like a walking wood demon, or maybe one of the evil ravens in their raven chairs with some of their nefarious equipment, anti-raven particle magics that you can use. A lot of fun little ideas that could easily be expanded into a more gameable experience. I'm also a real sucker for all the pencil sketches at the back. For some reason, these always seem more real to me when you can see the author's pencil strokes and you can imagine how he drew it. I just love this stuff. Now, The Kingdom of the Dwarfs is a kind of a setting book looking into dwarven culture, but it treats it as if they were a real ancient civilization that we've only begun excavating and learning about. As with all the books in this video, it has really incredible art, mostly because the illustrator was, I believe, also the illustrator who did the graphic novel version of The Hobbit, which of course features plenty of dwarves. So at the beginning here, we can see how all these archaeologists have begun excavating and learning about the ancient dwarf civilization. Life in the underground. So we can see how they mine, what the dwarven mines might look like. This stuff would fit really well in with anything Tolkien related, because these dwarves have that aesthetic to them. The tombs of Aegul, what their burial sites might look like. What does the court of the king look like? What is the royal dowry, the royal hall, how their entire monarchy and social system function, the Hall of Dragons. Just a lot of beautiful watercolor work that takes this whole culture very seriously and tries to give it as much verisimilitude as possible. I really love this sequence too, because it actually works out how dwarves would fight, right? If you have a very short person fighting against humans in the mythic past, how would they develop their arms and armor to be able to defeat them? You would want to design shields like this that could block sword strokes coming in from above while you spiked them in the knee. You would develop combo attacks where you could block with your shield and then someone would get onto your shoulders and jump over the top and attack them from above. This proposes that the many stories about dragons in Earth's history were actually caused by huge dwarven kind of steam shovel war machines terrifying local villagers. Just a really cool and unique book. All these books are quite long, so I'm barely skimming the surface of everything that's inside them. But if you know someone who's really into Lord of the Rings or this kind of folklore, I think this would be a really good pick. Next, we are expanding out into science fiction with Expedition by Wayne Barlow, who is an absolute legend when it comes to creating science fiction creatures. These types of books would be really great if you have a game master or players that are really into things like Mothership or maybe Traveler, where you're traveling to weird places and encountering creatures that you've never seen before or no one has ever seen before. What would creatures on other worlds actually look like? So this book pretends that it is the record of an expedition to an alien planet, cataloging all the creatures found there. And it is kind of an experiment in speculative evolution. It imagines in a very different place, under very different conditions, how would life evolve? What would it look like? What are some elements that would look similar to creatures on Earth? And what are some elements that would be very, very different? Not only is the art extremely imaginative and very well done, it's also slightly disturbing. It has a little bit of an uncanny valley feel to it because these creatures feel kind of like creatures on Earth, but there's always something kind of wrong about them. Their body plan always has these genuinely alien elements that look like things that you've seen on Earth, but are incorporated into the creature in new and bizarre ways. Like this one has this bottom jaw that completely detaches and then slots back up into its mouth. If this book looks interesting to you, I would definitely encourage you to check out other books by Wayne Barlow, because he has plenty of others in similar veins where he investigates creatures and ecosystems very different than our own. Most famously, I believe he has an art book similar to this that examines what he thinks the ecology of the underworld or hell would be like Dante's hell. And boy, is that one pretty disturbing. The last book we're going to look at today is another one for sci-fi nerds, and this one is Worlds Beyond Time, Sci-Fi Art of the 1970s. If you love old pulp paperbacks, and especially the cover art on those paperbacks, this is an amazing book. Just look at this stuff. It has some of the most amazing art from the 1970s, when you had all of these fantasy artists or sci-fi artists who would be told, draw a cover for this fantasy novel or this sci-fi novel. And they wouldn't even ask what the plot was. They didn't care. You would just draw some crazy psychedelic scene and you would slap it on that baby and you would publish it. And as a result, if you collected a lot of these novels, you would just get this strange gallery of weird outsider art and these visions of other universes, often completely unrelated to the actual contents of the book. But that's not what you were in for. You were just there for the art. Man, look at this piece from Ringworld, which of course many kids today will recognize as being a Halo. Halo stole it from Ringworld. Sometimes the art is grouped by the artist who did them, and sometimes they're grouped by theme, which I think is fun. For example, skull planets. That's just a theme that shows up in a lot of these illustrations. Asimov's Foundation series. So we have these more detailed, realistic ones, but also these very abstract covers. I think these covers are the ones I actually own, but I love Michael Whelan, who did these ones. If you look at Michael Whelan's website, you just end up with seeing so many covers that you have seen somewhere before. He's a real legend when it comes to doing fantasy illustration. I could flip through this book all day. Just so many gorgeous pieces, many of which just kind of tickle the edge of my mind. Like, I'm sure that I have seen this somewhere in some part of the library when I was a kid, digging through the sci-fi section. And I love how weird they get. Like, look at this. What is going on? I don't know. The section on fantasy is near the back and features some absolute masters like Frank Frazetta, of course. Although if you're really into Frazetta, you need to get some art books that really focus on his work to get the full impact. Rodney Matthews. I grew up on a book of Greek mythology that was illustrated entirely by Rodney Matthews. And it was only later that I figured out that he was like a big heavy metal cover artist. I had no idea at the time. Lots of covers on wizards. See, Dragonflight. This was one of the first sci-fi or fantasy. I'm not sure what genre Pern really is in. One of the first ones that I ever read. So cool to be able to see the entire original piece of art right there. Well, those are my recommendations for some great gifts for dungeon masters or for players. Links to all of these are in the description below. I actually have a number of other recommended lists in terms of role-playing games if you want to go in that direction, or more related stuff like these books. I'll put all of those lists down below if you want to check them out. Let me know down below if there are any other books similar to these that you think are really cool that I should check out. And thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.